everybody. This is we are Group 1. This is our presentation. We are going to be talking about small group communication, problem solving, and obviously effective leadership. So before we dive into the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves so that way you guys have a better understanding where we're coming from. My name is Fernando Mata. I've been with Novo Nordisk for 10 years in sales, which puts me in lots of group settings, and that's where I drew my expertise from.
My name is Teresa Nadowski. I've worked at Health First for over 11 years. In my role as a laboratory supervisor, I have to apply good communication skills and problem solving in order to give good quality results to our patients.
Good morning, I'm Daniel O'Quinn. I currently work for Memorial Regional Hospital, and I've been with the system for 1 year. And I work in a senior administrative role with CEO, CFO, and the Surgical Services Executive Committee. So I definitely deal with effective communication on a daily basis.
Good morning, my name is Lisa Bergeron. I currently work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, but prior to that, I was training infantry Marines in preparation to go into combat zones. So effective communication and leadership meant life or death.
Good morning, my name is Jessica Lerner. I'm with Community Care Plan. I've been in the healthcare industry for 20 years, the last 15 of which I've spent leading and development and implementation teams.
So part of effective teams is obviously effective communication. So we're going to start with a little video to kind of show you guys how not to communicate.
Excuse me, I'm gonna find as long as it's okay with you. I'm crazy about baseball. Will you stand still? Pick up your hat. Go pick up your hat. Now look. Then you'll go and penny your popcorn and don't interrupt the act anymore? Yes, sir. All right. But you know, strange they seem they give ball players nowadays very peculiar names. Funny names, nicknames, pet names. Not as funny as my name, Sebastian Dinwiddie. Oh, yes. Science and that? Oh, absolutely. Yes. Now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third. That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team. I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third. Do you know the fellas' names? Yes. Well, then who's playing first? Yes. I mean the fellow's name on first base. Who? The fellow playing first base for St. Louis. Who? The guy on first base. Who is on first? Well, what are you asking me for? I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, who is on first? I'm asking you who's on first. That's the man's name. That's whose name? Yes. Well, go ahead and tell me. Who? The guy on first. Who? The first baseman. Who is on first? Have you got a first baseman on first? Certainly. Then who's playing first? Absolutely. When you pay off the first baseman every month, who gets the money? Every dollar of it. Good, Dad. So who gets it? Why shouldn't he? Sometimes his wife comes down and collects it. Whose wife? Yes. Well, the man earns it. Who does? Absolutely. No, I'm trying to find out. What's the guy's name on first base? No, what is on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? That's what I'm trying to find out. Don't change the players. I'm not changing nobody. Take it easy. What's the guy's name on first base? What's the guy's name on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. We're not talking about him. How did I get on third base? You mentioned his name. If I mention a third baseman's name, who did I say is playing third? No, who's playing first? Stay off of first, will you? What do you want me to do? Now, what's the guy's name on third base? What's on second? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. There I go, back on third again. Well, I can't change their names. Will you please stay on third base, Mr. Broadhurst? Now, what is it you want to know? What is the fella's name on third base? What is the fella's name on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. Third base. You got an outfield? Oh, sure.
Now I know this is a bit of an exaggerated example, but by show of hands, how many of you guys have felt similarly in meetings or communicating through the chain of command at work to this example? Okay. The good news is you're not alone. So here's some statistics on what contributes to poor communication. 91% of professionals admit to daydreaming during meetings. I'm sure we're all guilty of that, right? 73% of professionals bring other work to meetings. 39% of professionals say they dozed off during meetings. Now, we all know that in the healthcare environment, the bottom line is really important. So I'm going to give you some information on the costs of poor communication. On average, poor communication costs the United States hospitals about $12 billion a year. Professionals who attend 61 meetings per month with over 50% of this time wasted. And on average, poor leadership can cost a company 7% of their annual revenue. The more you know. Now I'm going to introduce Jessica, who will introduce our purpose. Teresa.
So given those examples that Lisa just gave us, as healthcare executives, we face situations like these. Some executives know how to handle them, and others don't. We want you to be among the ranks that do. Successful healthcare executives understand effective problem-solving skills, including small group communication, team participation, and effective leadership qualities. So, at the end of our presentation, you will have the tools to understand group communication, team participation, and effective leadership in 5 areas. The first being 7 characteristics of effective problem-solving teams, problem-solving skills, decision-making skills, good communication skills, and effective team leadership. With that, we'll start with our first presentation by Fernando, the 7 characteristics of problem-solving teams.
So, in healthcare, we're often faced with very complex problems. And these problems, as you guys all know very well, we put together teams of knowledgeable persons to attack these problems. It's vital for healthcare executives to work well in groups, but it's also very important for them to recognize the differences between successful teams and unsuccessful teams. Successful teams solve problems using 7 typical characteristics. Value organization and preparation, utilize periodic training, they examine assumptions, evaluate solutions, avoid groupthink, manage cultural diversity, and operate virtually. So, under value organization and preparation, we've all been a part of that meeting where you get there and you're ready to go, you're prepared, and nobody else in the room seems to be as prepared as you. So preparation obviously is important. It can have a direct effect on productivity throughout the meeting. Another area is the meeting procedure or the format. So for instance, if you are discussing private information, you'd probably want a round table setting, versus if you're going to be doing more public information, you want feedback from the audience, things like that, you can do a panel program type of meeting. Utilizing periodic training. In the sales industry, we do a lot of this. We're constantly being trained on the newest procedures, the newest benefits to a medication, FDA approvals, things like that. Another great example is the John Deere example in our book. In the 1990s, John Deere was noticing a lull in sales and revenues, so they decided to implement the Work Smarter program. What this program did was they trained people on how to effectively communicate in team settings, and also how to display leadership qualities. And what they saw as a result of this program that they implemented was they reduced manufacturing costs by about 10%, and still to this day, John Deere personnel are considered some of the brightest and skilled in their industry. The importance of periodic training on virtual teams, you can imagine if people don't know how to use the software, they're not really going to be able to communicate very well. So that's where that plays in. Examining assumptions. Assumptions interpreted as facts can be very counterproductive to a team. Just because somebody says something doesn't mean that it's rooted in fact. And then teams that question these opinions lead to healthy and effective collaboration. So now, successful teams also evaluate solutions. And one of the ways you can do this is set a predetermined set of criteria. So you can say, we want to accomplish A, B, and C, and then you get into it. You brainstorm, you start working as a team. And after you come to a solution, you go back to your criteria and you say, did we solve A, B, and C? Another area is to deliberate positive and negative implications. Teams that deliberate the negative impact of a solution are 86% more likely to arrive at a better solution. Groupthink can be a very substantial problem in group settings. Groupthink is essentially, do I want to avoid any issues, or is it more important for us to actually come to a successful solution? And so you see this a lot with sociable style leaders. They want everybody on the team to like them. They don't really want to step on anybody's toes, so you don't get a lot of collaboration. Techniques to avoid groupthink are, if you're on the team, maybe offer to bring in some experts. And if you're the leader of the team, some ways to avoid groupthink are to not inject your opinions so much into the group. Managing cultural diversity. We're in South Florida, we're the melting pot, we've got a lot of cultural diversity on any team that you become part of. Embrace it. Make it part of your strategy to come up with a creative solution. If you think of how Americans, we like to find a solution, implement it, move on to the next one. Whereas a perfect example is in Japan, they like to identify a problem, maybe work out, discuss an option, see how it's gonna work, and then after they've all decided that it's the right thing, then implement it. And so merging those two styles of problem solving can be very beneficial to your team. The advantages to managing diversity, again, are you can arrive at a more creative solution to the problem at hand. Now, operating virtually. This is something that we can all, learn more about. Synchronous and asynchronous technologies. Basically, synchronous is FaceTime, it's Skype, it's something live where everybody's contributing at the same time. Asynchronous technologies are a little bit more, old school. Email, message boards, where you kind of have to wait. The response isn't immediate. And then face-to-face interaction versus computer mediated communication. It depends on the team. However, face-to-face meetings always transfer more information between team members. And then with computer mediated communication, you do sometimes you're able to arrive at more appropriate implementable decisions because people are meeting at the one time, they want to get it done, and you're covering vast areas. So with that said, we're going to move on to basic problem-solving procedure. Let's read.
So you just heard about effective characteristics of effective problem-solving teams. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the problem-solving procedure itself. So John Dewey's reflective thinking process follows a 6-step problem-solving procedure, 3 centering on problem identification and 3 on decision-making and problem resolution. John Dewey was an education philosopher born in 1852, and basically his approach was to identify the strengths within your group and essentially apply those to the scientific method. So the steps are: define the problem, research and analyze the problem, establish a checklist of criteria, list the possible alternatives, evaluate each alternative, select the best alternative. Problem solving and decision making are 2 ways groups can work together to reach a common goal. Problem solving is pretty self-explanatory, problem to solution, whereas decision making is choosing from amongst the best fit alternatives. I'm going to take you through the first 3 steps, and then I'm going to let Daniel take you through the rest. So for the first 3 steps, the basic process of problem solving involves good preparation and effective communication within the team. And that starts with defining the problem, researching and analyzing the problem, and establishing that checklist of criteria. So step 1, define the problem. Don't underestimate the problem by jumping to solutions. Oftentimes when you're in a group, everybody thinks they understand the problem. But realistically, think about working in a hospital environment. You have a problem, but it's interdisciplinary, right? You're working with pharmacy, ED, laboratory. Everyone is a subject matter expert in their field. So you want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So the scientific method is something I mentioned, right? You remember in 2nd grade when you had your poster board and you had to write that question, right? So in order to make sure that everyone is clear on the definition of the problem, it's kind of a good idea to go ahead and write the right question for the right answer. So those questions must include, you have to be specific, unbiased, and open-ended. And also you kind of want to know who's going to act on it. So let me give you an example. Should the speed limit on I-95 be changed to a slow 45 miles an hour? When you're looking at that, you're already being biased because you're calling it a slow 45 miles an hour. It's not specific because who's going to act on this? Why are we doing this? And it's also a yes-no answer. So when you throw that out to a group, it's going to be a quick and easy response, yes, no, right? Well, if I rephrase that to say, should the Florida Department of Transportation consider to be a safe, what would the Florida Department of Transportation consider to be a safe speed limit on I-95? So who's going to act on it? The Florida Department of Transportation. Why are we doing it? We're looking for a safe speed. It's an open-ended question, so you're going to have discussion amongst your group, and there's no bias in it. These questions usually fall into 3 categories: questions of fact, questions of value, and questions of policy. Questions of fact look at the truthfulness of something. Questions of value look at the desirability of a person, an object, or an idea. When I read that in the book, I thought that was kind of weird, but if you think about it, if you're trying to hire someone, you're looking at their desirability, so you'd set criteria based upon that. And then questions of policy look at current procedures and how you might need to tweak some of those. In the end, you definitely want to avoid misunderstanding. Make sure everyone is on the same page. This will avoid your conversations in the future going in circles. So step 2, research and analyze the problem. So you need to come up with your list of topics to be discussed. How can you have a good discussion if not everyone is intelligently informed to speak to it, right? You want to gather the needed information. That might be through charts, stats, PowerPoints, whatever that may be, so that everyone is able to discuss the problem to come to that intelligent solution. And during your topic discussion, you want to stay the course. A good idea is to list those topics and put it on an agenda. In our book, it states that groups often change topics every 58 seconds. And that doesn't even mean that they complete that topic. They just kind of move on to the next one. So if you have an agenda and you follow it, it kind of makes sure that you conclude each topic and can move on appropriately. Step 3 is establishing a checklist of criteria. What are criteria? They're your goals or guidelines for reaching a solution. You want to define levels of need and filter them appropriately. Because once you start talking, you're going to have a lot of opinions coming through. There's usually 4 types of criteria. The first being task criteria. That's really the guts, the what. What are we trying to do? Operational, how? How are we going to do this? And then you have your must criteria, which is obviously the things that are important and are non-negotiable. Those criteria need to be there. Opposite of that would be your want criteria. Those are the things that would be great to have, but you might want to, you can live without. How do you use your criteria effectively? Well, you want to focus on quality and not quantity. So you want to keep it to a workable number of items. You don't want to be overwhelmed. You want to list and evaluate those in your team, and you might want to further delegate that to your musts and your wants. So those are the first 3 steps. I'm going to have Daniel walk you through steps 4 through 6.
Thank you, Teresa. So, as you just heard from her, she went through the first half. So I'm going to go through the second half of Dewey's model. So this is skills 4, 5, and 6 in your book. So the thinking process behind making a good decision actually comes from a lot of different avenues. So I'm going to discuss brainstorming, I'm going to discuss electronic brainstorming, a few other methods that you utilize in order to come up with some alternatives that you can actually implement in a business setting. So this will also depend on several factors, depending the size and the scope of what you're trying to do, the budget that you're working with, and a time frame. Because sometimes you might have big ambitions, but you might have time constraints, or you might not have the monetary ability to do so. So I'm going to start with step 4. What you want to do is list all possible alternatives. Some examples that are included in the book is actually companies like Valvoline or Quaker Pen, which actually came up with products just on brainstorming alone. So what you want to do in this case is not give any negative feedback, but you actually just want to see what everybody has to say. This is a moment where you're literally going to get everybody's opinion, write them down on a piece of paper. It's not to critique, but it's just to have a long laundry list of any ideas that you think could be successful for your institution or your company. So after you've done that, another technique that a lot of companies use in the modern day is actually electronic brainstorming. Obviously, we live in the technological age. So companies like Shell, they actually encourage their workers to use Google or to come up with some ideas over the web or anonymously send emails to one another to see what could be the best format to implement what they want to do. And last but not least, you do have a nominal group technique. Now, I don't know if any of you have been in a group with someone who's shy, someone who doesn't really want to give their feedback, or they're afraid that they'll get scrutinized. Nominal group technique is actually a good method for you to get those shy people involved without them getting any repercussions or, I guess, lashback. So that's definitely what you want to do first. Now, after you have all of these alternatives listed, then you want to evaluate each one. Depending on the criteria that you determine in the first 3 steps, that's where you're going to move forward. So let's say we have a group, a larger group, and you're going to have 20 different people with, let's say, 10 common ideas. What you want to do is combine the similar points, try to simplify it so that you have an actual combination of elements that will get you to where you want to get with your actual project. So once you've actually combined these alternatives together, then you can either tally them up, or you can use a different set of skills pretty much to choose what's best for your institution or organization. So here are the methods to reach the decision. By a show of hands, how many of you have been in a relationship? Since you have been in one, then you will know that there are times where you will reach a consensus with your significant other. There's times where you have to compromise, And there's times where you might have to vote, and in a business setting, it's not that different. So obviously, the best thing you want to do is reach a consensus. If you have a group of 20 people, that might not be very easy. So that's the preferable method if you have a smaller group. If a consensus, of course, is not attainable, then what you want to do is compromise. 7 of you in a group might have a great idea, 2 others might disagree, but in order to appease everyone, so there's no negative feedback, what you might want to do is just incorporate some methods from everybody's list, and that would go with what's best. And last but not least, if you have a group that's as large as this class, that might not be feasible. So if you can't reach a consensus or compromise, then the last ultimatum is to vote. Now, as you know, with politics or anything, a majority sometimes leaves 49%, or whatever the difference is, feeling a little ostracized. So the only, I guess, bad feedback about voting is the fact that you will have a part of your group not feeling the love, I guess. So now when it comes again to implementing these alternatives, you might be surprised some of the ideas that you come up with that you say, no, this isn't attainable, or that's ridiculous, might turn into a Picasso. Like the last idea that you expect, it actually turns out to be the best one. Sometimes your goals are very lofty. You're going to have some aspirations that a hospital wants to achieve or your business wants to get to. And in a business setting, unfortunately, the first choice might not be the best. That's why you want to have multiple solutions. If you do have a second choice, sometimes it might be easier, quicker to do, and even though it might not give you all the bells and whistles, it is a feasible alternative that'll get you what you need. And last but not least, I think this is very important, as with anything in the business setting or communication or interpersonal relationships. You want to know what works and what doesn't. So keeping a logbook or record of what failures you had and what successes you had is definitely beneficial. If you're going to embark on a similar task in the future, you don't want to run into the same hurdles or roadblock when you could have avoided it by simply going back to see what worked with your group before. So, without further ado.
So in terms of effective communications, the healthcare community is very dynamic. So tailoring communication is vital to effective problem solving. For successful communication to occur, team members can utilize commitment and preparation, active listening, and open-mindedness. So as far as commitment is concerned, it's important to show up to meetings, be there when you're going to be there, and be committed to solving the issue at hand. Preparation, as Fernando mentioned, know what you're going to be talking about, know what the references material is going to be on. Possess active listening. I really appreciate all of you guys right now who are showing active nonverbal communication, because it shows that you're actively listening. Also verbal communication. Yes, no, I understand. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, things like that. Be open-minded. Don't approach a meeting with preconceived notions and biases, because then you're automatically closing yourself off to being open and to experiencing new ideas and solutions. Task and maintenance roles also play a large part in team functionality, which I will expound on in the next slide, as well as Big 5 effective personality types that assist in the cohesion and success of teams. These are extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness. So, communication can positively affect team productivity, and as we saw in the video, can negatively affect productivity. How everyone's aware of Hurricane Katrina and the FEMA crisis and everything like that, correct? Okay. A show of hands, how many people think that Michael Brown, the FEMA director in 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, was effective in his communication and leadership? Anybody? No one. So, in chapter 10, beginning of chapter 10, it lists a whole bunch of reasons why he was ineffective, but I'm just going to expound on just one example. Essentially, when hurricane hit, he released a press release stating that local fire and emergency departments are not allowed to respond unless they were called upon. And when they tried to respond and do the right thing, he ordered the National Guard to send them back home. Now, that's not utilizing resources, that's not being direct and clear as a leader, that's not communicating, because this was a national crisis. Had he have done maybe the alternative of what he did, maybe 1,300 lives could have been saved. So, as I mentioned in the previous slide, task roles. These are actions that must be performed if the group is to accomplish its task. For example, initiating discussion. When you begin a meeting, ask an open-ended question. you know? So how do you guys feel that we are doing in terms of quality patient care? And elaborate. So, for an example, it would be, so am I understanding you effectively? This is what I'm hearing. In psychology, it's called the mirroring technique. Maintenance roles are also functions that must be performed to maintain harmony and group cohesion. So be encouraging, be supportive. You don't want to have a climate that is disruptive and dysfunctional when you're in a meeting. And also gatekeep. Try to share the information, share the spotlight, don't have too many chiefs and not enough Indians, that type of thing. Control the flow of communication. The big 5 effective personality types that really help in effective communication are extroversion. You want to be outgoing. Don't be too introverted because that's not really going to do anybody any good if you don't feel confident enough to share your ideas and experiences. And actually, you'd be surprised at how much it helps. Be agreeable. Let your team know that you're understanding them. I understand. I see where you're coming from. Be conscientious. You are not only responsible for yourself, but the outcome of whatever your team has decided on. So make sure that you guys are achievement oriented and have emotional stability. It's self-explanatory. Be calm and self-confident. Don't have dysfunctional qualities. Don't bring your negative problems into the team and things like that. And lastly, be open. Be willing to consider new ideas, and why not apologize if you're wrong or if you make a mistake. I will introduce Jessica, and she will expound on effective team leadership. Thank you.
So we've heard about team participation, problem solving, decision making, and leadership. Poor communication and good communication. Lisa gave a perfect example of you can have all the good team efforts possible, but if you have a poor leader, then you could end up with a disaster like we saw with Hurricane Katrina. Leadership is a vital component to the effectiveness and success of any team. There's 6 main theories about leadership. I'm going to review them with you today, and as I do, think about maybe which one fits with your leadership style or even your boss's leadership style. They are trait, function, 3-dimensional, situational contingency, situational leadership, and transformational leadership. First, let's talk about trait. The theory is that people are just born leaders. However, the industry really doesn't support that people just come out of the womb and are industry leaders. However, they do mention that a lot of leaders have similar characteristics, such as the self-confidence, self-awareness, the ability to grasp information quickly and in large volumes. That is common characteristics. But the industry does say that more likely those people have had a mentor in their life or an experienced, a role model in their life that helped them build those leadership skills. The next theory is really a function theory. And basically, this is the theory that anyone can be a leader based on the function or role they're performing at that moment. Very similar to what Lisa was sharing in a gatekeeper example. Have you ever been in a meeting and everyone's sharing ideas and the one person next to you might be shy and might be whispering something like, but doesn't feel confident enough to say it? Well, at that moment, if you stop the meeting or interrupt and nicely, respectfully, and say, I'd like Sally to share what she has to say, well, in fact, you are playing that gatekeeper role, and for that moment, that function, you are the leader. The next theory is 3-dimensional theory, and it surprisingly has 3 dimensions. The first being authoritarian, which is where the leader has power and control of the team, more power and control than the team would have. An example would be perhaps in the military where you have a platoon leader and the platoon. This can have positive and negative potential. Number one, a positive, an advantage could be you can reach decisions quicker using an authoritative model because there's not really a lot of discussion. It is going to be the way it is. However, disadvantage might be those people who have to do the task may not have buy-in, they may have hostility, they may feel stifled in some way. The second leadership style is democratic, which is much more of a shared decision-making theory. So the leader and the team share in the ideas. There's positives or advantages and disadvantages of this as well. Advantage could be you're getting buy-in from your team. You're allowing them to be motivated and use their creativity. And when you go to implement whatever it is, maybe they'll do it quicker and do it well because they have buy-in. However, the negative would be that it takes longer to reach the decision because there's more people involved. And the third is laissez-faire, and pretty much what it sounds like. This is a more hands-off, delegated approach of leadership. Doesn't always work well, particularly if you have a group that needs a lot of instruction and direction. But if you were giving a group of vice presidents as an example, a project to do, you pretty have trust that they are leaders, they know how to operate, they know how to come to consensus and get a task done. You could use the laissez-faire approach. The fourth is situational contingency, and this is the theory that leadership is dependent on the personality of the leader, and that personalities don't really change, and that there's two dominant personality types. There's task-oriented personality traits, which you might see in the military again, where you have a platoon leader who's leading his troop or his platoon to a challenging combat situation. He's not so interested whether they like him or whether they don't like him. He's just interested in everyone, surviving. And his word or her word would be what they need to follow. So it works well in the military, it works well in extreme situations. That would be an extreme situation. Whereas relationship-oriented leadership style is more where there's, concern about how everyone's feeling and, are we getting along? And this works more in the middle ground, not in extreme situations, but more of a middle ground, like in retail or banking or even in healthcare. Not in a surgical ward, though, probably. The fifth is situational. It actually kind of differs. This situational is kind of the opposite of the one above, in the fact that it states that the theory is leaders do change their style and they're flexible. Their leadership style does change based on the people they're working with and the situation and the task at hand. So there's four, different aspects of this. One could be, you could use a delegating style. Everyone in the group is ready, willing, and understands what they need to do. You could let them go and delegate the task. Second could be participating, whereas they know what they need to do, the team understands, but they might need just a little encouragement from the leader. The third is telling, where the team is willing to do it, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge, so they need more direction from the leader. You probably need to pay more attention and help them through whatever that task is. And last, just selling or coaching, which I'll just call coaching, is where you're probably working with a team who A, doesn't have the knowledge, nor has really the ability or the willingness to do it. And you probably have to give them very specific task direction and direct oversight. The sixth type of theory of leadership is transformational. And we've talked about, and probably in your lives, transformational leaders in the world. They're generally charismatic, they inspire us. A good example would be Reverend Martin Luther King, who inspired an entire nation to social justice when he had a dream. On the flip side, you could have unethical, transformational leaders whose motives are manipulative or self-serving. An example, and a very pressing example, would be perhaps Jim Jones in 1978, who convinced or inspired 800 people to drink Kool-Aid and commit mass suicide. So you have to be careful what type of transformational leader you're looking at. And because we don't want to end my part right now on such a negative, depressing note, I will want to mention there is a seventh leadership style, which many of us have experienced or could probably highlight a person who does this. It's called servant leadership, in which really it's the essence of serving others and doing for the greater good. And really nothing for yourself, but just helping others. Mother Teresa and all of the work she did for thousands of people in India without any need or desire for recognition or notoriety would be a good example of that. So now what we'd like to do is take the problem-solving skills we've talked about, decision-making and leadership, and put you to a game. So we would like you to all break into your groups really quickly, because I know we're running late on time. Break into your class groups, go ahead. Each of you will be given a roll of duct tape.
Stand up.
Stand up, stand up.
Get in a circle.
You'll be given a roll of duct tape. Go in a circle. Each person put an index finger towards the middle of the circle and put the tape on top of one. Everyone puts one index finger in. Look at the picture. And have it suspended on your fingers. The goal is to, as a group, go down slowly and have the duct tape touch the floor and come back up without breaking.
You guys can use like this area.
Try not to lose control of your duct tape.
No, we go like this.
All the way to the floor. You
Not
guys
yet, not yet, I'll tell you when.
Not yet. It's going to be timed. You have
2 minutes, end of your group.
Starting now.
Starting now.
Don't wait, you gotta move.
And remember, communication is key.
We gotta get out. You're gonna do your
How far are we going?
Go back up, back to where you started.
We should get a point for this. Up, and down.
Oh, they did it online. 20 seconds left. 20 seconds. They did it.
Oh, they had it. We had it.
I'm sorry. You can sit down when you're done.
We didn't go underneath, we poked it.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
Nicely
3, 2,
done.
1.
Okay.
Good job.
Good job,
Take your
group.
seats. Thank
Alright,
you.
well, hopefully, for most of you, this wasn't a sticky situation.
Ah.
So, it's time for our ducks and keepers. So, where's my, I guess my first group? Who wants to volunteer?
We rocked it
How
out.
about this? Group 2. Who's group 2? Okay.
There we go. So, group 2. What communication challenges did you face?
I guess initially just the instruction to get the project started, but once we realized it, it was pretty easy to coordinate.
So you had a good group. Alright, so group 3. Did a leader emerge?
Yes.
Just all the yelling.
Okay, and what type of leadership style did they show? Were they authoritative? Were they
Fair.
That's right. Alright, we're gonna like it. So,
Getting
that's
hot
good.
over there.
Now, group 4, were there any communication highlights
Or barriers.
or barriers? Yeah.
No, I think that we all listened to Frank, our
Yeah.
leader, and we would like nonverbal nod or.
Yeah.
So it was good communication.
He was pretty
Yeah,
fast.
slow.
So you guys have a structure. Good.
And we had good feedback. The fans and the feedback is really, really good.
Wonderful.
So, my next group, which one's 5?
Oh, that's us. What's
Okay, that's good. Okay, so, yeah, what problem-solving techniques did you come up with? Did you have to brainstorm? What-
No, we were all pretty much in cohesive oneness, and we did it real quick.
Adhesive or
You
cohesive?
guys were on the same page.
We totally rocked it out.
Cohesive oneness.
There
We're
was
fantastic.
no compromise.
Whatever.
Just saying.
Tape. I can't get my brain out.
So in conclusion, it was our goal today to provide you with the tools and guidelines to successfully perform in group-based settings, both in a participant and leadership role. We're confident that our presentation helped you learn about building successful teams, problem-solving skills and procedures, communication skills, and leadership to successfully perform in group-based settings. So in conclusion, you can choose this, or you can choose this. That's our presentation. Are there any questions that we might be able to answer at this time?
How about if you could ask one question that everybody can answer?
We're gonna answer them, or they're gonna answer
No, they're gonna, one question that you all take a shot at answering,
I'll each of us answer.
just for time's sake.
Okay, Frank, you wanna answer?
Yes, first of all, I enjoyed your presentation a lot. But the question I had was, what was the greatest challenge that you had in putting together your presentation?
I think one of the challenges honestly was geographics and work schedules, because she was in Seattle and he was in Dallas, and some of us live in Melbourne, and so we, just getting together and making it cohesive and the transitioning from one to the others was hard. So we had to meet in person to make sure, we hope, it looked like a very fluid, presentation. But it was challenging to get those, that time together.
I'll go second. I definitely don't think that a single leader emerged, which I thought was really neat, because most teams that I'm a part of, there's a defined leader before the group even gets together. And we all stood up and took individual leadership roles in different aspects of the presentation, which I thought was really great and refreshing, so.
Yeah, we all brought something different to the table, and it was really cool.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was just our Socratic kind of nature. So it was good to have an oval in the group because that way we were able to like focus. So it's just like combining like some person's OCD with another person's
Lots of
non-OCD.
Attention to detail,
So,
yeah.
And I would have to agree with Jessica as far as geographics go, but in the end, we were able to meet face to face, and you know, preparation is key, so.
We slept here last night.
Pretty much, yeah. Our families are a little angry with us, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your hard
Thank you
work.
guys.